A summer afternoon. 118 degrees Fahrenheit. Sand dunes in front, and a sparkling swimming pool in the middle of that sand. This is Phoenix, the city that makes you feel like nature said, "Don't settle here," and man said, "I will settle here." Phoenix, a monument to man's arrogance, the rise, crisis, and future of America's desert metropolis. If you land in Phoenix, Arizona during the summer, the first thing that hits you is the heat, routinely over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 38 degrees Celsius, often spiking to 110 degrees Fahrenheit or more. The second thing that hits you is a sense of wonder and confusion. How and why have nearly 5 million people chosen to live in this objectively hostile environment? The answer is a story of air conditioning, cheap land, overlooked water limits, and breathtaking ambition. Phoenix is, in many ways, a real-world version of a late-game civilization settlement, a sprawling city built in an undesirable area that nobody else wanted. And now, after 80 years of explosive growth, its future hangs in the balance. From dusty town to top 5 city. Just over 80 years ago, in 1940, Phoenix was a sleepy desert town with barely 65,000 residents. It didn't even rank among the top 100 largest US cities. Most Americans had never heard of it. The town had only been settled in 1867, meaning the time from its founding to 1940 was roughly the same as from 1940 to today. But over that second 80-year period, within a single lifetime, Phoenix transformed from an obscure dot on the map into the 5th largest city in America, surpassing Philadelphia in 2020. Only New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Houston now stand larger. Today, Phoenix is the quintessential example of American suburban sprawl. Endless rows of single-family homes radiating outward across the flat desert floor. At its peak in 2007, developers were converting an acre of desert into residential real estate every single hour. Even in the 2020s, Phoenix remains one of the fastest-growing metro areas in the country, pulling in Americans from high-tax, high-cost states like California. The lure? Low taxes, a booming economy, plentiful jobs, year-round sunshine, and beautiful winters. But back in 1940, no one could have predicted this meteoric rise. Phoenix sits in the Sonoran Desert, a valley with few nearby water resources. The Salt and Gila rivers that run through it are more like streams. The Gila averages only about 7 cubic meters per second, a tenth of the Rio Grande. So how did this impossible city come to be? The seeds of growth and crisis. The story begins long before Phoenix. For nearly 1,000 years, the Hohokam people inhabited the valley, building complex irrigation canals to farm the desert. They vanished around 1,450, but their canals would later be used by settlers. After the Mexican-American War and the Gadsden Purchase of 1854, the land became U.S. territory. Arizona and New Mexico were admitted as the last contiguous states in 1912. Interestingly, at that time, New Mexico had a larger population, 338,000 versus Arizona's 277,000. For decades, New Mexico remained more populous. But after World War II, Arizona exploded, and Phoenix led the charge. 2 key federal policies set the stage. First, the Homestead Acts of the 1860s offered free land, 160 acres, to anyone willing to farm it for 5 years. Second, the Reclamation Act of 1902 funded massive irrigation projects across the arid West. The government built dams on virtually every major river, including the Colorado River, the Hoover Dam, and Glen Canyon Dam. Created Lake Mead and Lake Powell, the largest artificial reservoirs in the country. With cheap land, a long growing season, and federally subsidized water, farmers in Arizona began growing thirsty crops like cotton, citrus, nuts, and alfalfa. Even today, agriculture consumes a staggering 72% of Arizona's water. The Colorado River Compact, a flawed foundation. In 1922, the 7 Colorado River Basin states signed the Colorado River Compact. They estimated the river's average annual flow at 16.4 million acre-feet. An acre-foot covers 1 acre with 1 foot of water. They divided 15 million acre-feet among the states, 7.5 to the upper basin, 7.5 to the lower basin, with Mexico getting the remainder. Arizona's share from the lower basin was 2.8 million acre-feet per year, more than 3 times New Mexico's allotment. That's one reason Arizona grew faster. But there was a fatal flaw. The 1905 to 1922 period used for measurement was abnormally wet. The true long-term average is closer to 13.2 million acre-feet. For decades, the states have been pulling more water from the Colorado than nature replenishes. On top of that, the West uses prior appropriation water rights. First in time, first in right. Early settlers and farmers hold senior rights. Cities like Phoenix that arrived later have lower priority. This system encourages waste. If a farmer doesn't use their full allotment, they lose the right. The post-war boom, air conditioning and suburbs. After 1945, 3 things came together to ignite Phoenix's growth. First, the invention of the portable window air conditioner made summer bearable. Second, cheap, flat desert land was perfect for prefab single-family homes. Third, the baby boom and a reputation as a retirement haven drew millions. In 1959 alone, Phoenix saw more new construction than in the 3 decades from 1914 to 1946. The city grew by 74% in the 1950s, and double-digit growth continued every decade since. Then came industry. In 1948, Motorola built an R&D center in Phoenix, lured by low taxes and proximity to Southern California. That was the seed. In 1979, Intel chose the suburb of Chandler for a semiconductor manufacturing campus. Over the next 40 years, Intel invested over $23 billion in 4 advanced fabs, making Phoenix its largest U.S. manufacturing site, employing 13,000 people and generating $8.6 billion annually for Arizona's economy. By 1980, Phoenix achieved something remarkable. It became the first Mountain West city to crack the top 10 largest U.S. cities, with 790,000 residents, surpassing Baltimore. But that same year, water issues became impossible to ignore. Learning to conserve. The 1980s turnaround. Arizona hit its all-time peak water consumption in 1980. Since then, despite adding millions of people and multiplying its economy 22 times, the state has reduced its water use every decade. How? In 1980, Arizona created the Department of Water Resources and enacted the 100 Year Assured Water Supply Rule. Developers must prove they have a 100-year water supply before building new subdivisions. The state also raised water prices in summer, discouraged lawns, down from 80% of homes in the 1970s to just 10% today, and started using treated wastewater for golf courses and parks. Converting farmland to suburban homes actually saved water because houses use far less than alfalfa fields. Today, Arizona's water comes from 41% groundwater, 36% Colorado River, 18% in-state rivers, and 5% reclaimed water. And still, 72% goes to agriculture, 22% to municipal use, and only 6% to industry. The 21st century crisis, drought and deadpool. Since 2000, the Southwest has been in a historic megadrought. Climate change has reduced Rocky Mountain snowpack, increased evaporation, and shrunk the Colorado River's flow by 1/3. Lake Mead and Lake Powell are at record lows. If levels drop too far, the dams may no longer generate hydroelectric power or release water downstream, a deadpool scenario. In 2023, the Biden administration threatened to unilaterally cut water allocations for the first time in history. Option 1. Protect California's senior rights and cut off Arizona and Nevada entirely, essentially draining the aqueduct to Phoenix. Option 2. Equal cuts across all 3 states, which would devastate California's winter vegetable industry and invite lawsuits. The threat worked. In May 2023, Arizona, California, and Nevada agreed to voluntarily conserve an additional 3 million acre-feet through 2026 in exchange for $1.2 billion in federal funds. But that's a short-term fix. After 2027, a permanent solution is needed. At the same time, groundwater is under pressure. In June 2023, the Arizona Department of Water Resources released a model showing that the Phoenix area's remaining groundwater can only meet 96% of projected demand over the next century. That 4% deficit has already led to a freeze on new residential building permits for cities on the outer fringes that rely solely on groundwater and lack a 100-year water designation. Wealthier suburbs like Scottsdale can continue building, but cheaper, low-income fringes will now be denied. Infinite suburban sprawl has finally hit a wall. The Saudi alfalfa scandal. One stark example of water waste. Saudi Arabia used to grow alfalfa in its own desert to feed cattle, but banned it in 2018 due to water scarcity. Instead, the kingdom leased over 3,000 acres west of Phoenix, pumping unlimited groundwater for free to grow alfalfa and ship it back to Saudi Arabia. Under public pressure, Arizona finally cancelled the lease in February 2024, a sign that even politically powerful agricultural users may face restrictions soon. Phoenix becomes America's chip capital. Just as the water crisis deepens, Phoenix is undergoing another transformation into the geopolitical heart of American semiconductor manufacturing. Over 60% of the world's semiconductors and over 90% of the most advanced chips are made by TSMC in Taiwan. But China threatens to invade Taiwan. If that happens, the global economy and US military would face catastrophe. So TSMC and Intel are diversifying. In 2020, TSMC announced a $12 billion fab in Phoenix. Then, after the Chips and Science Act 2022 provided $53 billion in subsidies, TSMC tripled its investment to $40 billion for two advanced fabs, producing 4 nanometer and 3 nanometer chips, the most advanced outside Taiwan. Intel also doubled down, adding $20 billion for 2 more fabs, making Phoenix Intel's largest global site. Combined investment, over $60 billion, the largest foreign direct investment in US history. Amcor, a packaging company, is adding a $2 billion plant nearby. When these fabs come online in 2025 to 2028, Phoenix will be America's primary backup for chip manufacturing. That gives Washington strategic flexibility. If China invades Taiwan, the US dash-in might not need to send troops immediately because Phoenix can supply chips. This is a seismic shift in geopolitics. But chips need water. A lot of water. Semiconductor fabs are extremely water-intensive. They use millions of gallons of ultra-pure water daily to clean wafers and cool equipment. TSMC alone will need about 9 million gallons per day per fab, roughly 3% of Phoenix's entire current water production. Both TSMC and Intel are building massive water reclamation facilities to recycle nearly all their water. But critics still question the wisdom of placing such thirsty industries in a desert facing historic shortages. To meet future demand, Arizona is exploring options. The most dramatic comes from Israeli company IDE Technologies, a global leader in desalination. IDE proposes building the world's largest desalination plant on Mexico's Sea of Cortez, then piping water nearly 200 miles to Phoenix and Tucson. Cost? $5 billion initially, delivering up to 1 million acre-feet annually, a 14% increase in Arizona's supply. But the water would cost $2,200, $3,300 per acre-foot, potentially over $3 billion per year. Environmentalists worry about dumping brine back into the sea and damaging the fragile marine ecosystem, as well as disrupting the Organ Pipe Cactus National Monument. An alternative, Arizona pays for the Mexican plant, and in exchange, Mexico gives up some of its Colorado River water rights to Arizona. So far, these remain proposals. Arizona seems more focused on conservation than on new supply. Can Phoenix survive the next 80 years? Phoenix has already proven that a desert city can grow while using less water. It has done so since 1980. But now the margin for error is shrinking. Climate change will make the region hotter and drier. The Colorado River will likely provide even less water. Groundwater is finite, and yet tens of thousands of new high-paying tech jobs are arriving, bringing more people and more demand. The city has tools left. Mandate pool covers, plant more shade tree. If all else fails, the desalination pipeline could be built at great cost. One thing is certain, Phoenix will not disappear overnight. Too much money, too many people, and too much geopolitical importance, those chip fabs, are invested in keeping it alive. But the era of limitless, cheap suburban sprawl is over. The 100-year water rule has already frozen development on the fringes. Future growth will be denser, more expensive, and carefully managed. As a character in King of the Hill said, stepping outside into Phoenix's 111 degrees Fahrenheit heat, "This city should not exist. It is a monument to man's arrogance. And like many monuments, it requires constant, costly maintenance." The next 80 years will test whether human ingenuity, air conditioning, water recycling, desalination, and the sheer will to survive can keep this desert metropolis thriving, or whether the chickens will finally come home to roost. For now, Phoenix endures, but it does so on borrowed water and borrowed time, and the whole world is watching.